it's very rewarding to grow and create and see life flower and blossom in so many different ways.
This is The Producers. I'm Dani Valent. Bruce Maynard is a fourth-generation farmer at Willydah, west of Dubbo in New South Wales. An innovator and pioneer, Bruce's system of no-kill cropping, as he calls it, goes beyond organic or regenerative. He sows wheat and rye into native pasture and grows it without chemicals. An experimenter and tireless explainer, Bruce aims to work with the natural environment instead of working and spending to subdue it. Success comes in the form of a wheat crop, sure, but also in the arrival of new birds and spiders.
So I'm Bruce Maynard from Narromine in New South Wales. So we're presently on my farm where I'm a fourth generation farmer here, and we have the fifth generation here as well. We mainly have a livestock operation, but also have cropping. So it would be defined as a mixed farm operation where we have the complementary effects of growing crops amongst our grasslands.
Bruce spent his childhood here. What was it like growing up on a mixed farm?
Yeah, growing up was very fortunate from the point of view that we had a very diverse farm in those days. So we had stud pigs on the place, and we used to hand milk a handful of cows. So that's what every morning we would do, and we had ducks and chooks and a wide range of things, and vegetables and fruit trees and all of that. Not completely self-sufficient by any means. I was too late a generation for that. The generation before was doing more of that. But one thing that I yearned for a little bit was actually a bit more of nature, and I don't know where that desire sort of comes from, because most of the fields, such as the one we're in now, were pretty much bare and open with just only an occasional tree interspersing the landscape. So it wasn't a very interesting landscape from that point of view. So during my working life, I've kind of reinstated diversity and mess to bring back interest back into the landscape.
When you're 4 generations on the land, there are going to be some stories. What is the Maynard family's history in grain?
Our family's relationship with growing grain goes back quite some generations, from my great-grandfather who grew amongst the first commercial wheat crops out in these regions, and then had a business model that enabled many share farmers to go and buy their own places by him buying the land and then having a share farmers work their horse teams in those days to grow wheat. And so that was a great expanding thing and a positive in so many ways. And then in the 1930s, my grandfather and father and grandmother won the World Wheat Competition with a particular variety, which amazingly, all these decades later, has turned up as being a preferable antique or variety that's useful for bakers to use. So we're very interested in regrowing that particular variety called Boomy, and then yes, and to our innovation of today with the no-kill cropping is just production in a different way. So none of all of these bits over the years could necessarily happen at different times. They happen when the circumstances and the whole context allows.
The Maynards farmed in all the regular ways, but Bruce started to see different possibilities for farming. Where others went simple, he started to value complexity.
If you like, we were very typical of what happened in those days, that there would be a mixed farming situation, but cropping was basically about taking the paddocks down to no other plant growth other than the thing you were planting, and then there'd be an interval of time before cropping again. So the livestock were an integral part of that. But as time went on, the benefits of diversity that we saw from initially changing our grazing operations and so forth to reinstate functional grassland led me to not wish to continue with all of the other available cropping approaches, which to one way or another always involved simplifying the ecology. So that's where we came up with the no-kill cropping concept, which stands out separately from all other cropping regimes in that it's about enhancing diversity and maximising diversity in order to grow crops.
The way Bruce farms is unusual when considered alongside conventional farms. What are the differences?
Yeah, so still traditional and existing standard practice is to basically either eliminate the plants or other plant growth in a field by either tillage, that is digging up the soil, or by applying chemicals to kill all the plant growth. And that works from the perspective that it maximises the amount of growth that you have from the thing you plant. But one can imagine we're essentially dealing with a little mini desert operation there every time we regrow our crops. So no-kill is different in that when you come to our paddocks, you might find that there's 100 or more species in the grassland, and we're just letting everything exist, and then we put our crop in amongst all of that diversity. There is a bit of chaos theory involved in this, and actually it rests heavily on ecological function, that the larger the diversity, the more that nutrients in that landscape are recycled and functions remain. So we're actually exploiting a little opportunity that regular grasslands have pulses of growth from annual plants coming and going, and so that's what our commercial crops are. So we can occupy that little niche without taking away the very basic functions. So in essence, we're sort of saying we can have our cake and eat it too, as long as we just keep all the cake there and keep on adding layers of icing.
So it's different, but what's actually growing at Narromine, and how do plants and animals work together across the seasons?
We grow our principally winter crops here, so we're talking things like wheat, barley and oats in amongst our grasslands that just function there all the time, have a multitude of species. That's where the animals fit into the picture, because the animals are, if you like, the workers over the top of the real machinery here, which is the plants, the multitude of different plants. So the animals are utilised to get the best result for the grassland. That's all functional, and then we grow our winter cereals. So they're sown in our Australian autumn. So anything now between February and sort of May, and then they're harvested in the period about October to December each year. We harvest with just conventional machinery. So the machinery we have adapted is just alterations on existing things. So we've tried to couple old with new to come up with a new synergistic system that works. And so the regular harvester just looks like any other regular harvester one would see in a field. But what we reap off the field is more complex. So we do have secondary sorting that usually happens with our grain, especially if we're sending to the likes of bakers or brewers and that sort of thing, because we've got a range of other plant material and other seeds and all sorts of interesting stuff there, which presently a lot of that goes just to animal feed, which they really love because it's so diverse and varied. But also there's been some little experimentation from some of the brewers on utilising that amazing variety of things, which is different every year. So, in a modern world, you do still need to have simple or standardised products to a degree, so that the baker or anybody else using it can utilise that wheat or oats or rye or whatever separate from other ingredients. But at the same time, this is a diversity situation that brings a lot of other stuff. So it's exciting to think about in the future the role of native grains separated out of that other line there as well. So all part of a functioning whole that continues to gain fertility instead of decline fertility over time.
There's the stuff you can see, and then there's the activity underground. Bruce talks soil.
What's happening out in the underground biome, which is the bigger picture, everything that's happening in the soil is all those interactions. And so once again, if we have complexity there, we have a larger range of interactions, and so that then flows through to how the plants assemble the final product. And that's where our consumption comes in, because there's these very, very small amounts of a range of phytochemicals that are going to come through into a grain that's grown in a complex situation versus one that can be grown in a simple situation.
Farming for complexity and diversity can mean happy surprises when it comes to the creatures that share the land.
Yeah, well, we've had a very long-standing program of not only reinstating the grassland, but also then a shrub layer and a tree layer. So I just enjoy seeing new things, and when new animals or birds and that sort of thing come and colonise the place, that to me is a big signal that there's a bigger pyramid of things that have happened underneath that arrival. We've seen some new reptiles come into the place that weren't existing here before. Transient birds in and out of the place. One notable one is the superb parrot, which is from southern New South Wales and sort of Victoria, but transits through here. So our little farm is actually quite an important stepping point for them on their way through. The largest flocks of superb parrots ever recorded have been on this place. So what we provide here is, even though small in landscape scale, is important for some species, and occasional species are recolonising that we hadn't ever known. So the birds such as reed warblers, which are a very pretty bird for some of our reinstated wetlands that we've put in. So.
Bruce's different style of farming has developed over decades. He shares one early epiphany in the 1980s during a trip to the US.
A couple of turning points or epiphanies. So I was lucky as soon as I finished school to go on a Rotary youth exchange for a year over to the US and into a farming community of a town about the same size. It was very interesting there for me to see that the farmers were actually going broke at a much faster rate than here, and so we're talking about the mid 1980s now, and that for me was fascinating, because in that part of the world they had beautiful glacial soils, reliable rainfall, government support and subsidies for their products, huge support through university research and everything, and if you like, the list of advantages went on, all the things in a way I'd grown up with here in Australia, saying if only we had those things. But they were going broke at a faster rate than here. So it's not about the resources or just the settings. It really firmly focused me on it's the systems you run over the top of your resources that will ensure long-term sustainability or not. And so when I came home, the 1980s were pretty hard for us, as well as many other people, with high interest rates and a change in lots of economic circumstances. Along with, I'd suggest, the first discernible signs that the climate was shifting somewhat for the worse. And so all of those things made me determined to chart a different path, because I couldn't see anything more from the conventional paths than more and more intensity and less enjoyment from the work in the long term if we kept on trying to do existing systems better.
There are communities in sustainable farming, but they aren't necessarily geographic, and and it can get a bit lonely being a pioneer.
Yes, we're running systems here that are diametrically opposed to where most of the mixed farming zone has gone. We're at the other end of the spectrum, so therefore there's a lot of the times there isn't a conversation, and as those practices from let's call it the more sustainable end of things versus the conventional have grown wider, it's harder to have joint conversations about changing either, really, to get the best of things. It is a lonely old road being a pioneer of things. Probably lucky I wasn't a big pub goer, so that. But I'm old enough now not to be, if you like, too concerned about it. And now in our times of the internet, you have a wider community now of a community of practice rather than a geographic community. So the loneliness part of things for people adopting new practices isn't quite as bad as previous decades.
No farming is easy, but is Bruce Maynard making it a lot harder for himself? He's simplifying his business and diversifying his farm's ecology when capitalism tells him to do just the opposite.
Yes, it's still to a great degree small margins, and we have to be constantly improving just to be here. So we have all the factors that every other small or medium scale business has, much of the complexity of larger businesses, but not the scale. And the modern world tends to provide two influences on us, but we would like to always think about reversing them. So there's every pressure on us to complicate our business and simplify our ecology. But we actually want to keep on doing the opposite. We want to have simple businesses for people and maximise the diversity and complexity of the ecology, so that is the long-term support for things, and a long-term reason too to get enjoyment of living in a landscape. If a landscape is only extractive with nothing else to offer, what sort of a value proposition is that for the next generation?
Some people see Bruce as an outlier, but he sees himself as farming for the future. As he explains, change can be exciting and creative rather than threatening.
Yes, I think probably like any change, real change comes from both push and pull factors, and there will be more push factors coming from outside, in that we cannot escape the inevitability that the indicators show that major climate change is upon us and potentially accelerating, and that is a threat to every presumption that we have about operating systems. So I'm firmly in the camp of saying, well, whatever small improvements we make to existing systems should be welcomed and championed, but that inevitably is not enough of an answer. We really need to creatively redesign systems. So, of course, for some folks that seems like a threatening path. I would say it's the most exciting path, really. But it doesn't mean we need to dispense or discard things that are necessarily useful or practical, but we do need to see their full range of effects. So every time that we're burning a litre of diesel here, the effect of that is not restricted to my farm. Every time I utilise something that's non-renewable, that is something that is a broader burden than just my internal farm system. So we can't stop the world or hop off, and we don't need to be Luddites or wearing hair shirts everywhere. But what we can do is be creative to still obtain high standards of living, but just more cleverly, and that's exciting, I believe, and possible. I believe we've been able to show it, and And that's the part of our enjoyment of our journey too, has been sharing this with now quite some thousands of people have visited our farm over the years. From now, I think it's 22 different countries have visited here to see various aspects of what we are doing, and that's great. That's a sharing thing. It's not so much a top-down approach. It's then them going back and tailoring some of those things potentially towards progress in their circumstances. I think on the positive side that we can do farming in ways that expands diversity and biodiversity and ecology in the whole, that it isn't a proposition of an either or, which is hugely exciting because that then brings benefit along for everybody, rather than us just having a view of agriculture existing in things. So that means that nature is at a minimum. We can actually run things that re-weight that basis quite considerably, and that has flow-on effects for the rest of the community. So we're actually doing a positive good here, even though economically we may never be rewarded for that. Some of these systems will be storing much more carbon and storing it in ways that hold for a long time. So there is a greater benefit for the broader, but I don't expect that we'll get paid for that.
Embedded in a complex ecology and thoughtfully future-focused, what does Bruce Maynard love about what he does?
Being creative. Really, I believe that farming is a wonderful, applied, creative endeavour. Somebody described it as just being broad-scale applied gardening, which can kind of agree with. It's very rewarding to grow and create and see life flower and blossom in so many different ways. And I believe this is maybe at the heart of why we tend to lose a lot of people out of our agricultural systems now, because the majority of their practices are about killing stuff rather than growing stuff. And that's a sad outcome of the systems that are conventionally the biggest producers.
Bruce Maynard isn't farming like those around him. His fields at Willydah look different, greener, wilder, a little more chaotic. He's a wheat and sheep farmer like many in the region, but he's just as interested in lizards, migratory birds and native legumes as grain yield. Where the system pushes for simplicity, he's valuing diversity and soil health and looking for ways that agriculture can be both profitable and sustainable. I wrote a story about Bruce Maynard and another wheat farmer and previous podcast guest Jason Cotter. The link to my story, originally published in Good Weekend magazine, is in the show notes. This is The Producers, a Deep in the Weeds production. I'm Dani Valent. Stay tuned as we talk to some of Australia's best farmers, makers and growers. Follow us on Instagram at Producers Podcast or contact us via deepintheweeds.com.au.